My annual review was marked Needs Improvement when my manager presented it to senior leadership. I'd signed off on Exceeds Expectations 3 weeks earlier. HR's archived copy showed my signature next to the higher rating. I found out by accident. One of the partners mentioned my development areas in a hallway conversation. I smiled, nodded, walked back to my desk and opened the PDF I'd saved the day I signed it. Every category. Exceeds expectations. Overall rating. Exceeds expectations. My signature. My manager's signature. The date. I opened my email, found the calendar invite from 3 weeks ago. Annual Review Discussion. Victoria Chen. That was my name. The meeting had lasted 40 minutes. My manager, Diane, had walked me through each section: client delivery, technical skills, communication, all exceeds. She'd printed 2 copies. I signed both. She kept one. I kept one. I still had mine. I didn't say anything. Not that day. I went home, scanned my signed copy, saved it in 3 separate locations. The next morning, I submitted a request to HR for my official personnel file. Standard protocol required 5 business days for file review preparation. I received an automated confirmation email. Case number, expected delivery date. Nothing more. I didn't mention the request to anyone. Diane called me into her office that afternoon. She wanted to discuss my development plan. She had notes, bullet points, areas for improvement that hadn't existed 3 weeks ago. I listened, nodded, took notes. She asked if I had questions. I said no. She seemed surprised. She'd prepared more talking points. I could see them on her desk, handwritten on a legal pad. I stood, thanked her for her time, walked back to my desk. My access hadn't changed. My client assignments hadn't changed. But the tone had. Small things, incremental. She stopped copying me on certain email threads, strategy discussions I'd normally join, client updates I'd normally see. She rescheduled our weekly one-on-one twice, then cancelled it entirely. I didn't ask why. I kept my head down, completed my deliverables, responded to client requests within the hour, maintained the same quality I'd always maintained. Exceeds expectations. 4 business days passed. On the 5th day, I received an email from HR. My file was ready for review. I could schedule a 30-minute appointment in their office. I booked the first available slot, 2 days out. Diane didn't speak to me during those 2 days. She walked past my desk 3 times without acknowledgement. I arrived at HR 6 minutes early. The coordinator, Marissa, met me in the lobby. Professional, polite. She led me to a small conference room with a table and 2 chairs. My personnel file sat in the centre. Physical folder. Thick. She explained the process. I could review any document. I could request copies. I could submit written comments or corrections if I found discrepancies. Everything would be logged. I thanked her. She left the room. I opened the folder. Employment contract, offer letter, background check authorization, tax forms. Halfway through, performance reviews. 3 years of reviews. All original signed copies. I found this year's review. The version in my file matched the version I'd signed. Every category exceeds expectations. Overall rating exceeds expectations. My signature, Diane's signature, the date from 3 weeks ago. I took my phone out, photographed every page, the signature page twice. I didn't request copies. That would create a record of unusual interest. I closed the folder, Checked my watch. I'd been in the room 18 minutes. I opened the door. Marissa's was at her desk. I told her I'd finished my review. Everything looked accurate. No corrections needed. She made a note in her system, thanked me for coming in. I walked back to my desk. That afternoon, I received a meeting invitation from Diane. Subject line: Q4 planning discussion. Attendees: Diane, Mr. Stephen Hale, one of the firm's senior partners. The meeting was scheduled for the following Monday, 4 days away. I accepted the invitation without comment. Friday arrived. I worked through my task list, submitted 2 client reports, closed out a project phase ahead of schedule. Diane didn't speak to me. I left at 5:30, same as always. The copies passed slowly. Monday morning, I arrived at 8. The meeting was scheduled for 10. I reviewed my project portfolio. Every deliverable complete, every deadline met, every client satisfied. At 9:55, I walked to the conference room. Stephen was already there. Diane arrived 2 minutes later. Stephen opened with pleasantries, asked about my weekend. I answered briefly. Then the 6th each, reviewing the team performance, conducting calibration sessions with department heads, looking at development trajectories. He'd noticed some concerns about my recent About 4-Hour-4. Diane spoke next. She'd been trying to support my growth, but she'd observed some gaps, missed opportunities, areas where I wasn't meeting the standard she expected. She referenced specific projects, specific deliverables. I recognized all of them. They were the projects I'd completed ahead of schedule, the ones clients had praised in writing. Stephen asked if I understood the feedback. I said I did. He asked if I had any questions. I said no. The meeting ended at 10:23. I walked back to my desk, opened my email, found the messages from clients, the thank you notes, the compliments on turnaround time and analysis quality. I saved them in a separate folder. That week, Diane scheduled another meeting, just the 2 of us. She wanted to put me on a performance improvement plan. Formal documentation, specific goals, 60-day timeline, weekly check-ins. She had the paperwork ready, already drafted. I read through it. The goals were vague, subjective. Demonstrate improved strategic thinking. Enhance stakeholder communication. No metrics, no clear success criteria. I asked one question. What would successful completion look like? She said she'd know it when she saw it. I didn't sign. I told her I needed time to review the document. Company policy allowed 72 hours for performance plan consideration. She looked annoyed, but she couldn't refuse. I took the unsigned document back to my desk. That evening, I drafted an email to HR. Subject line: Request for review, performance management process. Body text: I am writing to formally document a discrepancy in my performance record. On June 6th, I completed my annual performance review with my manager, Diane Foster. The signed review reflected an overall rating of exceeds expectations across all categories. On June 27th, I was informed by a senior partner that my review showed areas of concern and a rating of needs improvement. I have retained my signed copy of the original review. I reviewed my personnel file on July 7th and confirmed that HR's archived version matches my signed copy, not the version apparently shared with leadership. I am now being asked to sign a performance improvement plan based on feedback that contradicts the documented review I signed 3 weeks ago. I am requesting a formal review of this discrepancy before proceeding with any performance management process. Attached, copy of my signed review, scanned. Please advise on next steps. I attached the scan. I read the email 4 times, changed nothing. I saved it as a draft. I didn't send it yet. The next morning, Diane stopped by my desk. She asked if I'd had time to review the performance plan. I said I was still reviewing. She said she'd need my signature by end of week. I said I understood. She walked away. I waited. Wednesday afternoon, I sent the email to HR. I copied no one. I marked it normal priority. I received an automated response. My inquiry had been logged. Someone would respond within 3 business days. I went back to work. Diane didn't mention the performance plan again that week. Friday came and went. No signature, no follow-up. The following Monday, I received a response from HR. The email came from Janet Pierce, the HR director. She thanked me for bringing the discrepancy to their attention. She'd begun a preliminary review. She would need to gather additional information and documentation. She asked if I was available for a confidential meeting on Thursday. I confirmed my availability. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m, Conference Room C. Janet Pierce and one other HR representative. I didn't tell Diane. Thursday arrived. I worked through my morning tasks, responded to client emails, attended a project call. At 1:55, I walked to Conference Room C. Janet was there. So was Marcus Webb, the firm's head of employee relations. They thanked me for meeting with them. Janet started. They'd reviewed my personnel file. They'd confirmed that the archived review matched the version I'd submitted. They'd also reviewed the meeting notes from my review discussion with Diane. Everything aligned with exceeds expectations. They'd also reviewed recent communications between Diane and senior leadership. There were inconsistencies. Marcus asked if anyone had asked me to sign a modified version of my review. I said no. He asked if I'd been presented with any documentation that contradicted my signed review. I said I'd been told my performance had concerns, but I hadn't seen a modified review document. Janet asked about the performance improvement plan. I explained that Diane had drafted one. I hadn't signed it. I'd requested time to review, which was within policy. Marcus made notes. Janet asked if I'd experienced any retaliation or changes in treatment since my review. I described the facts: email exclusions, cancelled meetings, the planning session with Stephen where my completed projects were characterised as having quality gaps. I didn't editorialise. I stated what happened and when. Marcus asked if I had documentation of the client feedback on those projects. I said I did. He asked if I could provide copies. I said I could send them within the hour. The meeting lasted 42 minutes. At the end, Janet said they would continue their review. She asked me to keep the conversation confidential. I agreed. I walked back to my desk. I sent Marcus the client emails, 7 messages, all positive. 2 specifically praised the quality and depth of my analysis. I received a brief acknowledgement. Received, thank you. Nothing more. A week passed. Diane acted as if nothing had happened. She didn't mention the performance plan. She didn't ask about my HR meeting. She assigned me a new project, standard scope, normal deadline. I completed it in 4 days. On Friday afternoon, I received a calendar invitation. Subject: confidential HR follow-up. Attendees: me, Janet Pierce, Marcus Webb, Paul Richmond. Paul Richmond was the firm's managing partner. He oversaw all Australian operations. The meeting was scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m. I felt nothing. I accepted the invitation. The weekend was long. Monday morning I arrived at 8:15. At 9 I walked to the executive conference room on the 7th floor. Janet, Marcus and Paul were already seated. Paul stood when I entered, shook my hand, asked me to sit. He opened directly. The firm had completed its review. They'd identified serious concerns about documentation integrity and management conduct. They'd found that Diane had submitted a modified version of my performance review to senior leadership without my knowledge or signature. The modified version had been created after I'd signed the original. The firm's digital records showed 2 separate files with different modification dates. Paul said this was a violation of firm policy and professional standards. He said Diane had been placed on administrative leave pending further investigation. He said my performance review would be corrected in all systems to reflect the version I signed. He said the performance improvement plan would be voided. He asked if I wanted to transfer to a different team. I said I'd prefer to remain in my current client portfolio. He said that could be arranged. A new manager would be assigned within the week. Janet asked if I had experienced any negative impact to my compensation, benefits, or advancement opportunities as a result of the modified review. I said I'd been scheduled for a promotion review next quarter. That review had been postponed indefinitely after my annual review. Marcus made a note. Paul said the firm would restore my promotion timeline. The review would proceed as originally scheduled. He asked if I had any other concerns. I said no. He thanked me for bringing the issue forward. He said my professionalism throughout the process had been noted. The meeting ended at 9:34. I walked back to my desk. My email access was the same, my calendar was the same, but the tension was gone. 2 days later, Diane's name disappeared from the internal directory. No announcement, no explanation. I received an email from Janet. Diane's employment had been terminated. A new manager, Richard Moss, would be starting the following week. I met Richard on Thursday. He'd reviewed my file. He'd seen my client feedback. He asked what support I needed. I said I was fine. He said my promotion review was scheduled for 6 weeks out. He'd be conducting it. I thanked him. The weeks moved quickly after that. I completed my projects, met my deadlines, maintained my client relationships. Richard copied me on the relevant emails. He kept our one-on-ones. He asked clear questions and gave specific feedback. 6 weeks later, I sat across from him in a conference room. He walked through my performance, client results, delivery quality, strategic contributions. Everything exceeded expectations. He slid a document across the table. Promotion to senior analyst, 15% salary increase, effective immediately. I read it carefully, signed it, kept my copy. I thanked him. He said I'd earned it. I walked back to my desk, opened my laptop, found the folder where I'd saved everything. The original review, the client emails, the HR correspondence, the scanned personnel file pages. I looked at them for a moment. Then I archived the folder and moved on to my next project.